So these notes are going to be about equations of circles, both graphing from equations and writing equations. Okay, so to start off, we're going to learn about what kind of the basic form of the equation of a circle looks like. So I'm going to read from this small paragraph right here, this sentence. It says, the equation of a circle is based on the distance formula and the fact that all points on a circle are equidistant or equal distance from the center. Okay, so if you look at this picture right here, it has a circle. Notice that your center here is labeled as H and K. That should be familiar to you when you think back to your parabolas in algebra. The vertex was H and K. So similarly here, instead of the vertex, it's the center, but it's still called H and K. Okay, then they have a point labeled on the outside of the circle as X and Y, and the distance between them is R. Okay, and like the sentence said above, we know that distance is the same no matter what point you pick on the outside of the circle. So because of that, we can think about our distance formula, which is right here. Okay, we worked with that a lot this year. Okay, and then we know the distance that is equal all the way around our circle, no matter which X and Y we pick, is that equal distance is the radius. Okay, and that radius is equal between whatever point X, Y you pick on the outside of the circle and the center of the circle, H and K. And then to get to that last line, if you compare these two, you should notice the difference is the bottom line does not have the square root anymore. Instead, they took R and they squared it to get R squared. So if I erase kind of the stuff I have written here, okay, if I square this side, that means I have to square the other side, and then the square and the square root cancel. So that's how we get that bottom equation, which is kind of the general form of our circle equations that we're going to be working with. So the takeaway from this should be that here's our formula. It's equal to the radius squared, and we can identify our H and K here. Notice that we have built-in negatives in our formula, so the signs are going to lie. So if it's a positive, it's actually going to be negative. If it's a negative, it's actually going to be positive. I'm trying to think what else. If we come across it, we'll talk about it. Okay, so let's do some examples here. So these first three examples, we're just going to be working with some of the basics of the equation. Give the coordinates of the center and the measure of the radius of the circle. So your center is H and K. So you'll notice you have X and Y right here. So it goes H and K, where H is with X and K is with Y. Remember, the signs lie, so this is going to have a center of 4, -3. To get the radius, it's equal to the radius squared. So it's equal to 16, so that means the radius squared is 16. So if I square root 16, I'm going to get a radius of 4. Okay, if we look at the next one, okay, it looks a little funny because it's not rearranged in that form that we looked at above. So we just need to rearrange it how we want it to be. So we want it to be equal to the constant, 196. So I want that to be by itself. So I'm going to add this y plus 7 squared to the other side. And don't really have a whole lot of room. Okay, so it's going to be 196 equals, and when I add that to the other side, I need to decide, do I want x plus 5 squared to go first or y plus 7? Well, if you go back to the form, okay, we typically have x first, and that helps us with our h and k. So I'm going to put x plus 5 squared first, and then y plus 7 squared second. So then to get h and k, h is in the parentheses with x, k is in the parentheses with 7. Their signs lie, so this is -5 and -7. To get the radius, it's equal to the radius squared, so that means the radius squared equals 196. If you take the square root of that, you're going to get 14. let's take a look at the next example. It says write the equation for the circle J with center 2, 2 and radius 4. So the center we know is HK. I'm going to go ahead and write down my formula. R squared equals x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. So HK and the radius are the three things we need to be able to write our equation, and they give us those three things. So I'm just going to label my radius 4 above, and so I'm just going to plug those things in. So I have 4 squared for my radius squared, x minus 2 for h, plus y minus k. Whoops, and I know what k is. K is 2. And then the only thing that we need to re-simplify or simplify further would be 4 squared, and so I'm just going to rewrite that as 16. If you wanted to show that as another step, you could. Okay, let's look at the next one. Write the equation of the circle P, with center 0, -3, and radius 8. So similar as above, they give us the center HK and the radius of 8. So I know it's equal to my radius squared, so 8 squared is 64, which equals x minus h is 0. But if you think about it, do you really need it to say x minus 0? Because we know x minus 0 is just x. So we can actually go ahead and simplify that and just have x squared, sorry about that, x squared, and then do plus y, and if I'm doing minus -3, that's going to become a positive 3 squared. Okay? Next up, write the equation for the circle K, that passes through J, 6, 4, and has center 1, -8. So here, you should recognize that because this is point J and this is circle K, you know that J is not the center, right? We call the center point K. So we know that this is not the center. It's not HK. It's just a normal point that's X and Y. Okay, then they tell us the center down here is 1, -8. That's our H and K. So if you compare this question to the two that we just did, the main difference is they don't give us the radius. We're going to have to do some work to find the radius. So if I start by writing down my formula that I know, it's r squared equals x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Okay, I can think about everything that I have. I have an x of 6, that would go here, a y of 4, that would go here, an h of 1 would go here, and a k of -8 would go here. So they're giving me everything in my equation except for my radius squared. So that means I can plug everything in and then solve for my radius and then write my equation after that. So that's what we're going to do here. So I don't know my radius. I leave it as radius squared. X is 6 minus my h of 1 squared plus y of 4 minus a -8 would become plus 8. So then I'm just simplifying. Well, 6 minus 1 is 5. 4 plus 8 is 12. 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144. If I add those together, I get 169. And then if I square root that to get my radius, I get my radius equals 13. So now I know my radius. That's not what it's not my final answer, but it's important. And if I go back and look at the other two that we just did, we needed the radius and the center to write our equation. So I'm going to use that radius I just boxed in, and then I'm going to use my center HK there to write my final equation. So I'm going to get my radius squared, so I actually go backwards kind of, even though I solved for my radius, I really need it squared for my equation. And then x minus my h plus y minus my -8 becomes a positive 8. That is our final answer there. Okay, let's try another one. So this one is circle Q that passes through 2, 3 and has a center 2, -1. So it's just like the one we just did. passes through just a normal point, xy, and has a center, hk. So I have my radius squared that I don't know, x2 minus my h2 squared, plus y3 minus my k, so it becomes a plus 1 squared. So now I'm just simplifying. Well, 2 minus 2, if I do some quick shorthand, 2 minus 2 is 0. 0 squared is 0. 3 plus 1 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I get r squared equals 16. Now, if we learn from our last example, we don't actually need to square root and find my radius, because for our equation, we want our radius squared. So I can go ahead and jump down to writing my equation and know it's 16 is my radius squared, equals x minus my h from my center 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared. Okay, so we're going to change up a little bit, and we're going to look at how we can graph our circles. So the two things that we need to know to graph are going to be our center and our radius. So if you're looking at this one, it looks kind of a little different than the ones we've been working with because there's no parentheses. So you might think about, well, why would there be no parentheses? Well, if we go back to this one we had here, we had our x squared with no parentheses, and that was because our h was 0. So if we have no parentheses, that means there were zeros there and the parentheses weren't necessary. So I know my center here is 0, 0. And then my radius, if my radius squared is 16, my radius would be 4. So then I go draw it, center at 0, 0. You guys should know how to draw circles by now. And that's it. Okay, if we look at the next one, okay, it's not going to be at 0, 0 because it's not just x squared and y squared. There are parentheses. So here's h and here's k. So that means our center is going to be 3, negative 4. Our radius, if r squared is 9, then our radius is 3. So 3, negative 4. Radius of 3. And then we are done. Easy peasy. So this is the last one. Here we're writing the equation given the graph. So we've got this laid out really nicely on the right side where we need to know our center and our radius to write our equation. So the center looking at the graph is negative 1, 0. Radius, if I count from the center out, would be 3. So when I go to write my equation, I know that my center is h and k. My radius squared would become 9. And I would have x plus 1 squared plus, and I could just do y squared since k is 0.